Karma has come full circle. What was once hidden in the shadows is now being dragged into the light. The very arrogance, the superiority complex, and the high-minded pride that the narcissist and their new supply built their lives upon is collapsing beneath them like a house of cards. They thought their power, their status, and their empty titles would protect them. They believed their circle of influence, their false image, and their carefully crafted lies would shield them from the consequences of their actions. But hear me clearly. When pride rises, destruction always follows. No one escapes the eternal law of sowing and reaping. No mask, no charm, no deceitful smile can silence the voice of justice when heaven has decreed that the scales must be balanced. You see, they laughed when you were mocked. They celebrated when you were cast aside. They exalted themselves while lowering you, convincing themselves that they were superior, that you were beneath them, unworthy of their approval. But what they did not realize is that God Himself takes notice when the humble are humiliated and when the broken are despised. And now the storm they created is returning to their own doorstep. The very slander they whispered, the shame they tried to place on you, is now hunting them down with a vengeance that can only be described as divine. This is not just coincidence. This is not just bad luck. This is God's justice in motion. Just as Pharaoh hardened his heart and watched his kingdom crumble, just as Nebuchadnezzar strutted in pride only to be humbled like a beast of the field, so too the narcissist and their new supply are being dragged through a valley of shame. Their superiority complex has become their snare. Their pride has become their downfall. The higher they lifted themselves above others, the harder they are now falling before all to see. And you must understand this truth today. You don't have to fight for revenge, because the battle is not yours. The battle belongs to the Lord. And He is making an open spectacle of those who exalted themselves against you. Karma has come full circle. The superiority complex of the narcissist and new supply. Let us go deeper, my friends, because this is not just about arrogance, it is about a sickness of the soul. The superiority complex that the narcissist and their new supply cling to is not simply pride. It is rebellion against God Himself. It is the same spirit that caused Lucifer to be cast out of heaven, the same spirit that whispered, "I will ascend above the Most High." And whenever a human heart entertains that spirit, destruction is inevitable. The narcissist, filled with this poisonous belief, walks around with an air of untouchability. They act as though the rules that govern ordinary men and women do not apply to them. They think they are smarter, wiser, and more deserving of praise than anyone else in their circle. They confuse manipulation with intelligence. They confuse cruelty with strength. They confuse domination with leadership. And worst of all, they despise humility. They look at the gentle and call them weak. They look at the kind and call them naive. They look at the faithful and call them foolish. But the Word of God tells us, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." And what of the new supply? Instead of correcting this arrogance, instead of calling the narcissist to accountability, they joined in the dance. They fed the narcissist's ego. They flattered their pride. They whispered lies into their ears. They too adopted this superiority complex, as if by joining hands with pride they would somehow rise to glory. They mocked you behind closed doors. They dismissed your worth. They laughed at your prayers. They thought aligning themselves with arrogance would secure them honor. But, beloved, what they have truly secured is shame, because when you link arms with pride, you will always share in its downfall. Look at how the superiority complex manifests. It refuses correction. It despises truth when truth exposes the lie. It thrives on comparison, always needing to feel better than. It feeds off slander, because to lift themselves higher, they must push someone else lower. This is why you became the target. This is why your faith, your integrity, your patience, and your dignity became the subject of their ridicule. They thought that by tearing you down, they were elevating themselves. They thought that if they could shame you, it would cleanse them of their guilt. But hear me, shame cannot be transferred. If you hand shame to the innocent, God Himself will take that shame and place it back upon the guilty. The narcissist and their new supply walked in arrogance because they believed their world revolved around them. They valued appearance more than authenticity, image more than integrity, status more than substance. They carried themselves like royalty, but they lacked the nobility of spirit that true royalty requires. And now, what they believed was their crown is becoming their curse. What they thought was their strength is now revealed as their weakness. Let us not forget, Scripture warns us in Proverbs, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. That is not a suggestion, that is a law. Just as surely as gravity pulls a man down when he leaps from a high place, pride will pull a man down when he exalts himself above others. And so it is with the narcissist and their new supply. They believe they could live above consequences. They believe they could mock God's children and escape the harvest. But heaven does not forget. The scales of justice do not break. Every arrogant word was recorded. Every mocking laugh was counted. Every act of superiority was weighed in the balance. And the time of reckoning has come. This superiority complex is nothing more than a mask. Underneath, there is fear. Underneath, there is emptiness. Underneath, there is insecurity so deep that they must constantly crush others to feel alive. They must constantly create drama to distract themselves from their own hollowness. They must constantly seek validation because without it, they collapse. They pretend to be kings and queens, but they are slaves. Slaves to their ego, slaves to their image, slaves to the opinions of others. And yet, in their blindness, they trampled on you. They despised your humility, not knowing humility is the pathway to exaltation. They rejected your compassion, not realizing compassion is the mark of true strength. They ridiculed your faith, not understanding that faith is the anchor that weathers every storm. They thought they were superior, but in truth, they were impoverished in spirit. They thought they were rich, but they were bankrupt before God. Now hear this. When someone walks in a superiority complex, they are writing their own sentence. The narcissist and their new supply believed they were untouchable. But God is not mocked. The seeds of arrogance they sowed are already sprouting, and the harvest is bitter. Their words of slander are now returning as weapons against them. Their pride is now the very rope that hangs their reputation. Their superiority has become their shame. So let the world watch. Let the same eyes that once saw them exalted now see them humbled. Let the same tongues that once praised them now whisper in disbelief at their downfall. Because when the superiority complex collides with divine justice, only one outcome is possible: slander and shame upon them. The rise of karmic consequences and the return of slander and shame. Let us now turn our attention to the inevitable, the return of consequences. For a long time it seemed as if the narcissist and the new supply were prospering. They strutted in arrogance, they mocked your faith, they paraded their false success as though it were everlasting. To the natural eye, it appeared that nothing could touch them. Many of you looked at their smiles, their photos, their outward confidence, and wondered, how are they getting away with this? How can people live in deceit and not pay the price? But understand this: God's justice is not absent simply because it is not immediate. Justice delayed is not justice denied. What is sown in darkness must one day come into the light. Now that time has arrived. The seeds of arrogance have sprouted, and the harvest is bitter. The very slander they once spread against you is rising to swallow them. The shame they tried to place upon your shoulders has returned and settled heavily on their own. They cannot escape it, they cannot silence it, they cannot spin it into something positive. This is the cycle of life under God's order. What you release into the world will always come back to you, and when it returns, it comes multiplied. They whispered against you in secret, but now voices are shouting against them in public. They ridiculed you before a few, but now multitudes are questioning their integrity. They thought they were safe because their lies were accepted for a season, but every lie has an expiration date. Do you see the pattern? The very trap they set for you is the one they are now caught in. The very pit they dug for your name has become their own pit of disgrace. The very shadow they tried to cast over your life has become the storm cloud hanging over theirs. That is not coincidence. That is the hand of God. He has designed the universe in such a way that you cannot mock his order. The narcissist and the new supply thought they were smarter than divine law. They assumed that power, influence, or appearances could shield them. But when heaven withdraws its covering, no fortress can protect the guilty. Think about how relentless this cycle island. When you put cruelty into the soil of your life, cruelty grows. When you plant deceit, deceit comes to your door. When you scatter lies, lies surround you. The narcissist and the new supply cultivated a field of pride, manipulation, and ridicule, and now the harvest has come in waves. They do not just face one problem, they face many. Reputations collapsing, trust evaporating, doors shutting, whispers chasing them wherever they go. What once looked like a position of strength is now revealed as the stage of their public humiliation. This is not punishment for the sake of cruelty. This is correction. This is what happens when arrogance refuses to bend. If they had humbled themselves, if they had admitted their wrong, if they had repented, mercy would have covered them. But because they hardened their hearts, consequences had to soften them. And so slander becomes their teacher, shame becomes their classroom. The very humiliation they tried to avoid by rejecting you is now unavoidable, and it is shaping them in ways they cannot resist. Do not be deceived. Their smiles are cracking, their laughter is hollow. The very people they once impressed are now questioning their motives. The very allies who once defended them are now turning away. Their circle grows smaller, their pride grows heavier, and their shame grows louder. This is divine mathematics. The more they sowed against you, the more the harvest multiplies against them. And perhaps you wonder, why now? Why not sooner? The truth is that God was gathering evidence. He was letting the cup of iniquity fill. He was recording every act of slander, every word of mockery, every display of pride. He was holding your tears as testimony, storing your prayers as petitions in the courts of heaven. And when the time was ripe, he turned the page, and the consequences began. That is why you are now seeing the unraveling. That is why what once seemed untouchable is now crumbling. Understand this: their shame is not random. It is the direct echo of what they released. They mocked you, now mockery follows them. They shamed you, now shame surrounds them. They whispered lies, now lies eat at their own name. They exalted themselves, now their fall is visible to all. The circle has completed, the scales have been balanced. This is not karma in some vague mystical sense. This is the hand of the Almighty God executing his perfect justice. And so, What should you do? Do not waste your life seeking revenge. Do not poison your spirit by replaying their downfall like entertainment. Your role is to stand firm in faith, to continue walking in truth, to let God fight your battles. He has already shown you that He is faithful to defend you. He has already proven that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Lift your head, because while they are drowning in shame, you are rising in honor. While they are trapped in slander, you are being vindicated. While they are mocked, you are being remembered and restored. If this word resonates with your spirit, I want you to declare it now. Justice is mine through God's hand. Write it in the comments. Speak it out loud. Pray it in your quiet time. Let it echo in your home. Because when you confess it, you are aligning yourself with the truth of heaven. Say it again until it burns in your heart. Justice is mine through God's hand. Divine judgment and the collapse of false foundations. There is a law written into the fabric of creation that no one can escape. When something is built on lies, it cannot stand. It may look solid for a season. It may impress outsiders, it may draw applause, it may even fool those who desperately want to believe it is true. But when the storms come, when the winds of divine judgment begin to blow, the house built on deception collapses every time. This is what we are now witnessing in the lives of the narcissist and their new supply. They built their world not upon truth, not upon love, not upon integrity, but upon false appearances. Their foundation was not righteousness, it was arrogance. Their cornerstone was not humility, it was deceit. Every stone they laid was secured with manipulation, every wall they raised was supported by ego. And though for a time it appeared strong, though for a season it seemed unshakable, the judgment of God is now exposing it for what it is, a fragile tower destined to crumble. Think carefully about what this means. They rejected you because they thought choosing you would ruin their image. They believed that standing beside you would invite ridicule from their families, from their communities, from their so-called social circles. So they turned away from loyalty to preserve status. They rejected truth to preserve reputation. They chose the comfort of their false world instead of the challenge of authentic love, and in doing so, they failed the test placed before them. For every divine connection is a test, and every act of rejection carries consequences. Now the very thing they tried to protect, their image, their status, their name, is being destroyed. The same community they feared would laugh at them for choosing you is laughing at them now for their downfall. The same reputation they thought would be safeguarded by lies is being dismantled by those same lies. The very world they tried to preserve by rejecting you is unraveling before their eyes. That is divine justice. When you build on sand, the collapse is not just possible, it is guaranteed. Do you see the pattern of God? He allows the proud to rise for a moment so that their fall becomes undeniable. He lets them build their towers high so that when they fall, the lesson echoes further. He gives them rope, not to save them in arrogance, but to let them tie their own knot of destruction. The narcissist and the new supply thought they were clever in their scheming. They believed that choosing lies over truth would give them stability. But the higher the lies built their house, the harder the crash would be when divine judgment came. And judgment has indeed come. Careers are faltering, relationships are unraveling, trust is evaporating. What once seemed permanent is suddenly fragile. What once looked like security is now nothing more than quicksand. Their foundation is being shaken by forces they cannot control, and no matter how they scramble, no matter how they try to repair the cracks, the collapse is inevitable. This is not punishment for its own sake, it is revelation. God reveals the truth by removing the mask, by tearing down the stage, by stripping away the illusions. He is showing them and the world that nothing built without him can last. The lies they lived by are no longer effective. The charm that once manipulated is now powerless. The strategies that once deceived are now exposed. Everything they thought was strength is being revealed as weakness. And as their world falls apart, they are being forced to face the one reality they tried hardest to avoid. You cannot defy God's design for love, truth, and integrity without paying the price. The collapse of their foundations is not random. It is orchestrated. It is the handwriting on the wall, the decree from heaven that enough is enough. Their high places are being torn down, their idols are being shattered, their pride is being ground into dust. Understand this: when God begins to judge, he does not simply touch the surface. He goes to the root. He tears apart everything that is not aligned with his truth. That is why the narcissist and their new supply are losing not just one thing, but many. It is why the destruction touches their relationships, their finances, their reputations, their peace of mind. Divine judgment leaves no stone unturned. It dismantles every false support until only truth remains. And when the dust clears, when the tower of arrogance has fallen flat, the lesson is unmistakable. No life can stand when it is built on deceit. No future can prosper when it is built on pride. No relationship can endure when it is built on exploitation. Only what is rooted in truth, humility, and the fear of God can survive the storms. Everything else must fall. The price of arrogance and the heavy weight of shame. Arrogance always demands payment. Pride may look free at the beginning, but it carries the highest interest rate of all. The narcissist and their new supply did not understand this truth. They believed that their superiority complex would elevate them forever, that their mocking laughter and haughty words would vanish into the air without consequence. But arrogance is like a debt collector that never forgets an address. It may wait quietly for a season, but when it knocks, it comes with a bill that cannot be ignored. The price of arrogance is shame. For every act of disdain, for every moment they exalted themselves above you, for every word of slander they spoke, a record was written. Now the account has come due, and the weight of shame is pressing down upon them. They cannot walk into rooms without feeling the whispers. They cannot open their mouths without sensing doubt in the air. Their pride once made them bold, but now it makes them fragile. What they built to look powerful is being used as evidence of their weakness. Consider the nature of this shame. It is not just embarrassment, it is exposure. It is the collapse of the image they carefully guarded. The narcissist and their new supply thrived on perception. They depended on the approval of others to keep their false sense of superiority alive. But when God strips away that approval, when the lies unravel, they are left naked before the world. Their arrogance, once their armor, becomes the very chain that binds them. This shame is not temporary ridicule. It is a deep humiliation that penetrates their identity. Their words return as weapons against them. Their arrogance boomerangs back into their own chest. And no matter how they scramble to rebuild the facade, the cracks are visible to all. Shame settles on them like a garment they cannot remove. They wake with it, they sleep with it, they carry it in every interaction. Their superiority complex, once displayed proudly, now marks them as fools. Think about how heavy this weight becomes. Pride demanded they always appear perfect, but shame makes their imperfection undeniable. Pride told them they were untouchable, but shame exposes their vulnerability. Pride exalted their names in social circles, but shame drags those names through the mud. It is a reversal so complete that even they cannot comprehend how quickly the tables have turned. And this is the true price of arrogance. It leaves you with nothing but disgrace, where you once sought glory. This shame is not random, it is measured. It is tailored to their deeds. Just as they tailored lies to wound you, now life tailors circumstances to wound them. Just as they sought to silence your voice, now their voices tremble under suspicion. Just as they pointed at you in mockery, now fingers point at them in disgust. The scales are balanced, not by accident, but by divine design. Arrogance demanded that they climb high, but shame ensures their fall is witnessed by many. And notice this: shame does not only touch their outer world, it corrodes their inner world. It gnaws at their thoughts, invades their sleep, turns their own mind against them. Their superiority complex once drowned out their conscience, but now conscience is awakened, and it shouts with unbearable volume. They replay decisions in regret. They rehearse conversations in torment. The very confidence that once intoxicated them has evaporated, leaving them hollow, restless, unsettled. This is the cost they did not calculate. They thought they could exalt themselves forever. They thought they could treat others with contempt and escape unscathed. But arrogance always writes a check that the soul must eventually cash. And when the payment is due, the currency is shame, humiliation, and the loss of peace. Their laughter is gone. Their smugness is gone. Their superiority is gone. What remains is the heavy weight of disgrace, pressing down until they either humble themselves or are crushed completely. The humbling of pride and the breaking of the ego. Pride can stand tall for a season, but when God decides to humble a man or a woman, there is no fortress high enough to shield them, and no disguise thick enough to hide them. The narcissist and the new supply are walking into that season now, a season where the very ego they worshipped is being broken into pieces. For years, they let pride be their compass, their god, their protection. They leaned on arrogance as though it were a pillar that could never fall. But pride is not a pillar, it is a brittle reed. Lean on it too long, and it will snap beneath the weight of your own deception. Their lives are now unraveling because ego has met its match. The arrogance that once gave them boldness has turned into the very tool of their humiliation. Once they strutted confidently into gatherings, commanding attention with their false superiority. Now, their heads bow under the invisible weight of disgrace. Once they believed people admired them, now they sense suspicion in every glance and doubt in every whisper. The same ego that demanded the spotlight is now exposed under that very light, revealing cracks, flaws, and failures for all to see. Ego is always fragile. It survives only as long as others are willing to feed it. The narcissist and the new supply demanded constant supply of praise, admiration, and validation. They thrived on being the center, on being the one everyone noticed. But God, in His wisdom, has cut off the flow. The sources that once filled their ego are drying up. Friends turn cold. Family members withdraw. Even allies grow weary of the constant demands. Without the stream of external validation, the ego shrinks, and they are forced to face the emptiness within. That is the humbling hand of God. This breaking of ego is not just external, it is internal. The very thoughts that once empowered them now torment them. Their pride told them they were invincible, but their conscience whispers the truth they can no longer ignore. Every failure becomes a mirror. Every closed door becomes a sermon. Every humiliation becomes a crack in the armor they so carefully built. They cannot silence the voice inside that says, "You are not who you pretended to be." And so, what once gave them confidence now becomes the source of their greatest torment. Humbling comes in stages. At first, they try to fight it. They attempt to patch the cracks, to rebuild the image, to double down on their superiority.